Via Skype from Sana'a is Hakim Almasmari, who's the editor-in-chief and publisher of Yemen Post. Thanks very much for joining us on Al Jazeera. We hear a lot of statistics coming from the NGOs and from the United Nations, but what is it like actually on the ground? Give us some idea of just how desperate the situation is for people trying to eke out every day whatever they can get their hands on.
The world already knows that Yemen is the worst humanitarian disaster in 70 years, so we're not going to repeat that. The problem is the aid that was allowed into Yemen over the last year only was enough for 5% of the country's needs. So that 5% is now over as well because of the siege. You have children dying of hunger. I visited a family the other day, 17 people, of parents, children, and grandchildren, all of them, having one large piece of bread and dividing it for their children and putting this bread in water to make it softer. An entire family, this was their meal for lunch. Right now, there are millions of children who are sleeping hungry. And as we are talking right now, over the last 10 minutes alone, 7 airstrikes have rocked the Yemeni capital, Sana'a. So those who are not dying from hunger are dying from the war, and it's not enough that the children are sleeping hungry, but now they're also sleeping hungry and scared, crying because of these airstrikes. So it's a misery that's ongoing day by day, and the problem is it's not the Houthis who are suffering, it's the innocent millions of civilians who are paying this price and on a daily basis.
And Hakim, there is aid at the border trying to get into the country. There's vaccinations. The international community seems to be at least sending some help, but it's just not getting in. How is that affecting people when they know that what they need isn't that far away?
Even if those aid organizations were allowed to bring those food in, it's only enough for 5% of the country's needs. That's saving 5% of the country's children, and you're leaving 95% vulnerable to death, vulnerable to a very dangerous future, a very dangerous health situation long term. So even the aid that was allowed to come or that is waiting to come or into the country, it's not enough for only a very small portion of the country. I'm surprised of how the world knows that, or the UN in specific. It's not enough to announce that Yemen is a disaster, humanitarian, while staying months and months and months continuously doing nothing to solve this crisis and just watching these innocent civilians dying. Yes, they're focused on the airstrike, one airstrike that hit Riyadh, but ignoring that, since that airstrike, at least 200 civilians have died in Yemen by Saudi-led coalition airstrike. So I'm surprised of how one thing is getting focused while the other deaths of civilians is being ignored, let alone those who are dying from hunger and losing their loved ones because they cannot feed them.
And Hakim, the tensions between those countries that are waging the proxy war that is going on in Yemen at the moment, they seem to be getting further and further apart. What would you say directly to the countries who are involved now from outside onto the fighting? What would your message be to them?
Keep your war between yourselves. There is no proxy war in Yemen. Iran is not involved very much in Yemen. If Saudi has any problem with Iran, they should solve it directly on their lands through negotiations, not on the innocent civilians of Yemen. The problem is when the powerful are too scared to the powerful, or those who are strong as well, they go to the poor and put more oppression on the poor. And this is why these innocent civilians are paying the price. The proxy war is being fought on a country that has no interest between the two warring sides, and this is where always the poor pays the price of the richest mistakes.
Very grateful for you talking to us on Al Jazeera. Hakim Almasmari, coming straight from Sana'a.